Hello and welcome to another Icd-11 video. I'm Dr. Islam Ibrahim, and in this video I want to introduce you to the Icd API. Icd-11 is a digital classification. It's fully electronic and it's designed for seamless integration with digital health applications and electronic health records. Most people think of ICD codes as a flat list for a drop-down menu, but Icd-11 works differently. We, the users, interact with Icd-11 through the Icd-11 coding tool, an electronic tool developed by the World Health Organization for reporting and coding diagnoses in Icd-11. We type in our medical term or diagnosis in the search box, and the tool functions as a user-friendly search engine that chooses natural language processing. We then select the diagnosis by a simple click, and we can add details to that diagnosis to form code clusters to fully represent the clinical reality of the cases we see in medical practice. In an electronic medical record, or EMR, the Icd-11 coding tool can be embedded in any field where the diagnosis is documented, so that when you type the diagnosis in that field in the EMR, you're actually typing it into the search box of the Icd-11 coding tool, with access to its full smart search and coding functionality. As the user documents the diagnosis, the coding tool becomes a data collection system at the point of care in a way that seamlessly integrates with the clinical workflow. The input in this case is clinician-friendly terms used in real-life clinical documentation, including common abbreviations. And the output, saved into the database, is a standardized set of data elements based on the user selection from the coding tool search results. And we'll talk about these elements later in the video. But how is that possible? It's the Icd API which makes that possible. And this is how the WHO opens the Icd-11 content and search functionality to electronic health information systems, or our electronic medical records. But what is an API? An API, or Application Programming Interface, is a connection between two software applications, which enables them to communicate with each other to transfer data. Think of an API like this: a client, a server, and the waiter between them. The client is the application that starts the conversation by sending the request. That's the electronic medical record where the user interacts with the coding tool. The waiter, or the API, connects the client to the server by sending the client's request to the server, where the WHO's Icd-11 content is. The server then sends the response with the waiter back to the client. And the requests and responses happen through the API, and none of the technical programming is visible to the user. The client doesn't know what instructions the waiter used when communicating with the chef in the kitchen, and from the user's point of view, the experience is a seamless connection. Every API comes with an API documentation, more like a comprehensive technical instruction manual which describes the set of rules or protocols that define how the two applications communicate with each other to exchange data. The WHO provides the API documentation for free, and it can be found at the Icd API homepage. An API is not intended to be used directly by Icd-11 users, so it's not for clinicians or coders. Rather, it's for the programmers or developers in your hospital IT team or your health facility who rely on the API documentation to structure the requests and responses to deploy the API. The WHO also provides the embedded coding tool, which allows your IT team to directly embed the coding tool into any field where you want to type the diagnosis into your electronic medical record or any software or web application. What the embedded coding tool does is that it communicates with the API at the back end and will render itself as part of your software while functioning exactly as the WHO online coding tool. This gives you robust implementation because you're using the exact tool that the WHO is using. Your IT team can try the code playgrounds and play around with the live examples on the WHO website. Let's see. Once you start searching in the search box, the field starts behaving and looking exactly like the online Icd-11 coding tool with all its features. Once you know how to embed the coding tool, you can now make it part of your electronic medical record. And the coding tool search box becomes your field for reporting the diagnosis, and you can insert as many as you need. From the user's point of view, the user is unaware of the technicalities behind the tool they are using. To them, it's just a field for reporting the diagnosis in a friendly way which speaks their language. The Icd API and embedded coding tool are free. And Icd-11 can be integrated into any software in electronic medical records, health information exchange platforms, and terminology servers, regardless of whether the software is developed in-house, open source, or proprietary. And in 2025, the WHO pre-released Icd API Fire support, which adds Fire support for software that need to access Icd-11 using Fire. But do we have to be connected to the internet for Icd-11 to work in our EMR? Because the Icd API is hosted on Microsoft Azure cloud servers, you can use the embedded coding tool with the cloud-hosted version of the API online. But you can deploy the API locally offline, and you can do that using a Docker container in your local server, which allows for full operation without an internet connection. And this enables you to use the coding tool offline. From user perspective, using the coding tool offline is exactly like using it online. And this is actually the preferred deployment because you get the exact same content, user interface, and functionality, but you're unaffected by any internet connection problems. And some government facilities prefer not to be connected to the internet for security purposes, so offline local deployment of the API is a good option in this case. What data do we get when deploying the API or the embedded coding tool correctly into our electronic medical record systems? Let's take a look. Suppose we search for the diagnosis acute hemorrhagic cholecystitis. The Icd-11 coding tool searches as we type and gives us the correct search result. Now let's see what was saved in the backend. We have three main data elements. And where do they come from? Well, let's see. So this is the code of the category we selected on the electronic medical record, which is used for standardized statistical reporting worldwide. That's what these Icd-11 codes are made for. This is the category title, which is where our selected diagnosis, acute hemorrhagic cholecystitis, is classified in Icd-11. And this is the specific index term we selected from the search results of the coding tool. And having this displayed as text is very useful when printing out or sharing discharge summaries and patient reports. And finally, the element which makes Icd-11 truly a digital classification and terminology and enables semantic interoperability between systems, the foundation URI. And if you want to know more about URIs or what they are, you can watch this 2-minute video on our channel. Now, it's important to know that if you choose to post-coordinate any more details to this diagnosis, the details will be reflected in each one of these three data elements. If you want to know more about post-coordination, we'll cover that topic in later videos. Now let's see what's in our cart before we check out today. The Icd-11 coding tool can be integrated within any electronic medical record system, regardless of the software you're using. When we embed the electronic coding tool, it becomes a data collection tool at the point of care on our system. The coding tool can be integrated with electronic medical records by deploying the Icd API. And the WHO provides the Icd API documentation for programmers and developers for free at the Icd API homepage. The integrated coding tool can be used offline just as it can be used online. And we can do that, for example, using a Docker container. But there are other ways for deploying the coding tool locally, and you can find out more about that on the Icd API homepage. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.